Let's now bring in Professor John Stremlau, Honorary Professor of International Relations at the University of Witwatersrand, to also weigh in on the current developments in the Gaza war. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time with us today. So let's talk about just how significant is this Gaza ceasefire in terms of long-term stability out in the Middle East.
That's the million-dollar question that really can't be answered today because, you had an illustration this morning where the Israelis refused to go and implement the ceasefire until they had the names of the hostages, the 3 hostages that are going to be released, and the 3 women. And the Hamas said it was a technical problem, and you can understand that given the destruction that has been wreaked on Gaza. But Bibi Netanyahu was really hard-nosed about it, and I think that he is struggling to contain his right wing in his cabinet. They deliberated for 7 hours Saturday night or Friday night, Saturday night, on this deal, and so I worry that it's going to be very difficult to get a negotiated solution to stages 2 and 3, but there has been a change in the dynamics of the region, and because of Israeli success and then the overthrow of Assad in Syria. And so it's a different ball game. And now with Trump in the White House, he sent Witkoff over to negotiate this first stage, and that was successful, and he's claiming credit for it. But I don't know whether he's going to resurrect the Abraham Accords, and if so, then he would have to go along with the 2-state solution that is the minimum demand for Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel. So it's a very confused situation, but it's promising nevertheless. And I think South Africa should work very, very hard as it can to bring about a 2-state solution.
Very interesting indeed, Professor. So how do you then think that the release of these hostages that we understand it's the 3 females around 1600 hours Central African time, I suppose if you're on this side of the equator, Palestinian prisoners impacts the broader peace process in the region? Because as we understand, this is just the first of a very long way or road to bringing total peace to the Middle East.
Well, it is, and it's a very difficult road diplomatically, but we don't know, except that there was this precedent of having a ceasefire, and then it was evaporated in the further negotiations about the extent to which the Israelis are going to tolerate the independence of Palestine, and that's to be negotiated. So we really can't say very much, except that the warning signals were in the delay of the 8:30 implementation of the ceasefire, and I believe reports indicated that 19 Palestinians were killed just by the attacks in the hours that lapsed between the 8:30 deadline and the real deadline.
And Professor,
implementation.
Maybe Professor, let's also outline then what could be some of the potential obstacles to ensuring that the ceasefire actually holds and is not short-lived. I mean, you alluded earlier on to Israel's swift inaction when they heard that Hamas had not, of course, furnished them with those 3 names of the hostages to be released. And we understand, we're getting reports, although unconfirmed at this stage, that around 19 Palestinians were actually killed during this morning's 3-hour delay. And we know that in the neighboring West Bank, there's also been reported continued fighting.
Yes, there has been, and this is the Israeli hard right hell bent on clearing, ethnically cleansing the Palestinian territories, and expelling or killing the Palestinians. The Trump ambassador designate Saunders, the former governor of Arkansas, is an ethnic cleanser who just believes that Israel ought to clear its territory of Palestinians, and whether or not he is imposed upon for getting a settlement is a big question. But Trump's and envoy Witkoff did play an instrumental role, apparently, in persuading the Hamas to go ahead and concede this trade-off of hostages for relief. And we'll see what happens in the next 6 weeks. But it's very, very hard to predict. And the record has not been good, but the situation is changing. And what, as I said earlier, what Trump decides to do is critically important.
Professor, what do you say to those that say that this deal was actually, in effect, about 13 months ago, and that Netanyahu was just dragging his feet to achieve, well, whatever he wanted to achieve, which we still don't know what that was?
Well, Netanyahu has bet on Trump being a bro and being supportive of his campaign, but he's a realist also, and he wants to stay in power. And don't forget, there is a broad swath of the Israeli public that doesn't like the fact that Israel has been accused of by the World Court of a plausible genocide, and the ICC is after Netanyahu and the International Criminal Court, and so it is become. It's so ironic because when I was in the Palestinian territories in the mid '80s, the mayor of Jerusalem, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, Ben Venisti, told me that he couldn't stand to work with John Dugard and visit South Africa. He worked very well with John Dugard. But he didn't want to see apartheid on a grand scale, and I certainly looked upon. I was traveling to South Africa frequently in those days, and it looked to me, it walked and talked and acted like apartheid. And Jimmy Carter named his book "Palestine: Peace, Not Apartheid," and that's a long tradition of the least sympathizers with the Palestinian cause in the U.S., of which I'm one. But I think that for the transactional Trump, it's going to depend on Saudi Arabia saying, look, we can recognize the state of Israel if you're prepared to back our claim for a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be a very interesting question that will be settled, I think, in the next 6 weeks or so.
Absolutely, Professor. Now, in light of everything that we've seen, all the developments that we've seen, what do you foresee as some potential possible scenarios during this 42 days of this particular deal, if either, of course, Israel or Hamas does not abide by the deal, Professor?
Well, if they don't abide by it, it's going to be more hell to pay from those partisans on both sides. But they've got a very careful timetable: February 3rd and February 9th, the 22nd day, and then by March 1, the 42nd day. That they're supposed to gradually reassure each other on their willingness to stick to the timetable agreed to and on the first phase, and begin discussions of the second and third phase, which are the really tough issues about withdrawal of Israeli forces and the question of the settlements and the question of who's going to run West Bank and Gaza, and it goes on and on and on. And I've just been around this track for 30 years, and I'm cynical as hell about the willingness of these two states. There's no Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk in the equation, as I've written about. Sinwar was a hardliner for the Palestinians, and Bibi Netanyahu is certainly a hardliner and has the power of the state behind him, at least for now. So I just don't know, and I don't know. I can't predict Israeli politics either.